Well, happy Valentine's, everyone. It is Pastor Brian Noble, CEO of Family Policy Institute of Washington Action, and I have special guest Representative Jenny Graham. And so, Jenny, welcome to the program.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me tonight.
Now, this may seem really interesting for us to come in on Valentine's, like maybe we're just hard workers and overachievers. I don't know. But but I do believe that this bill that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks is incredibly important and thought, maybe this would make a great dinner discussion as you're going out on a date tonight. So, Jenny, why don't you tell us about HB 1052?
Well, House Bill 1052 is the opposite of Valentine's Day, which that day we celebrate love.
Right,
Um, this particular bill 1052 deals with hate crimes
right.
and specifically to change language. There's already hate crimes laws on the books.
Mhm.
This particular bill was adding some language to it that was a little concerning uh, because it talked about a hate crime is committed in whole or in part when, and then it went from there. But the concerning part was in part. What does that mean? There
So,
was
Jen,
Yeah, there was no explanation, there were no side guards. It was just really incredibly wide open.
So as we go into this discussion for just a moment, I just want to remind our listeners that we don't have the House, conservatives don't have the House, we don't have the Senate, and we don't have the executive branch. So we are playing on the 1 yard line. At the very we have 99 yards to go is what how we're playing. And this bill was a wide open bill that basically, if I understand it right, very easily would assign a lot of things to be hate speech. Is that accurate?
That's the way that I saw it.
Yeah.
It's definitely the way that it came across when we heard the bill on the first day of session. And the example that was given absolutely concerned me because it only had to do with speech. There was no physical attack, there was no verbal attack, and it left you asking, well, where's the assault? Where's the actual crime? Yes, there was something said that wasn't very nice, for sure, but there wasn't a crime.
So sometimes when you're on that 1 yard line, you have to play a little bit of how do I put some guardrails on this really bad bill? Because it's going to make it through. I mean, the reality is they have the power on the committees, they have the power on the House floor, the Senate floor, and the executive branch. Is that what we're doing with this bill?
That is accurate.
Yeah.
Anytime that we when we're talking about legislation, it obviously has a beginning point, and then there's a whole process that the bill goes through, and that's different committees in the House, and it has to be voted on the House floor, and then it moves over to the Senate, and it goes through the same exact process there. And if it ends up passing through the Senate, then it comes back to the House again for us to be able to vote on the bill. So it it it, it is not at the total end of the process yet, but the bill itself is concerning.
So unpack that a little bit. You shared a story with me off air of an example that they were giving to this. Do you mind sharing that story or?
Sure. Um, and again, I want to frame this in the right way because this is such, a difficult topic that definitely can trigger, some people that have been hurt in one way or another. And that's not my goal. My goal is more, let's have a kitchen table conversation to try to understand this issue a little bit better and hopefully, work to deal with situations that would be an actual hate crime, but also have some side guards to make sure that somebody that's innocent isn't put into a position where they're guilty based on very, very, very low standards. That's not what our court system is based on. So to take you back to the beginning of that day in committee, the testimony started out, and the example given was that there was one of the state representatives that happened to be on a bus on the anniversary of 9/11. And she observed two women that were on the bus. One was wearing a hijab and the other was not. And as they ended up getting off of the bus, the one that was not wearing the hijab looked at the other and said, "I'm a Christian B."
Hmm.
Only it was the whole word.
Right. Right.
Um, and, that was shocking when that was said. Um, I was at first I thought, okay, well, typically we don't swear in committee.
Right. Right.
Secondly, I was asking the question, okay, so this was absolutely not something nice to say,
Hmm.
but where was the assault? Where was the crime that was committed? And, so that was something, really that kind of raised my concern, my flags, is this is the example that's being given for the need for this bill.
So let me be clear. As a pastor, a Christian pastor, I would say that there's a moral violation here. Like calling someone a B and saying that they're a Christian is inappropriate, and before God, it will be judged. I mean, that is not appropriate language before God, right? So we're not justifying what this person said, but what we're asking is this deemed a hate crime, right? So, uh, and so that's the question that you and the example they gave of what this bill would protect against. Is that accurate?
That's what my understanding was.
Yeah.
And, obviously, all of these committee hearings are recorded on
Right.
TVW. So anything that I'm saying can be proven in the video. Um, so as things kind of progressed, there were some questions that naturally came up because, in Washington state, we're certainly dealing with some, uncomfortable things, some really hard things when it comes to hate speech, when it comes to also certain situations, CRT, that if you're somebody that is white, that there is a certain part of the population that considers you to be an oppressor. So it has nothing to do with what's in your heart, what's in your mind, what you say, what you do. It's just based on your skin color.
Right.
And if you are anything but white, then you're a victim and that can never change. So rightfully so, I've got some questions going through my head because to me, crime doesn't care what your skin color is, how old you are, how much money you have, what your religion is. It just doesn't care.
Hmm.
It's about risk versus reward. Can somebody commit a crime and get away with it? That's how I see it. And so I, asked the question, I did ask that question that this has been said in our society. This, I was asking the prime sponsor of the bill, Representative Ryu, um, if this bill included somebody that is white skinned. And I talked about the fact that we, have had situations where there was a lady walking downtown Seattle and she was hit in the back of the head with a bat, you know,
Hmm.
just because she was white. We've had people that were doing the knockout game
Hmm.
where they would come up behind somebody and knock them out. And, what I was trying to wrap my head around was the example that was given was definitely, it hurt somebody's feelings.
Right.
But the other examples that I was looking at, there were people that were actually physically hurt. There were actually crimes that were committed. And that's what we were trying to get to the bottom of.
Right.
And the more that I dug into this, I ended up finding out that this was legislation that was requested by the King County prosecutor. So um, I was asking questions about this. Well, why would they um, request this bill? And they were talking about there being some confusion with um, juries if they were considering this issue. So they wanted to put the language in there in whole or in part to try to clear up confusion.
Mm,
However, what does in part mean?
right.
Right?
Well, and part of it would be even what does in whole mean? I mean, like, because you're weighing the motive of a person's heart. I mean, and yes, there can be physical assault. Yes, she may be verbally assaulted, right? That could be verbal assault to a person to just say what she said. Depends on, well, anyway, but we were starting to get to the point where we weigh that motive to such a degree where you're God playing to a certain degree on these topics. Hitting someone with a baseball bat is assault. I mean, period. I mean, it's pretty black and white when you do that. So, but in part, yeah, is there degrees of this? I mean, how does that work out?
Well, that's the question that I was left with. I was kind of asking, okay, well, what does that look like? And is does this mean that there's 1% proof required, 2%, 5%, 10%, 50%? You know, what's the bar that has to be met in order to prove that a crime was committed? And so I started asking questions, and California, I from what I'm understanding in their hate crimes, how they define it is they added in substantial part.
Mm,
So that takes it from in part, and it actually now starts to put a some side guards on what does this look like. And I looked up the definition of substantial, and on one part of it, it had to do with numbers and contracts, and there was another definition that said not almost 100% but not quite, right? So that
mhm.
kind of gave me a little bit of a starting point to look at, to then ask the question, if I or somebody else that I knew or loved was accused of a hate crime, would I want that metric to be somewhere from 0 to who knows where? Or would I want there to be that the court needs to prove that there was a crime that was committed? And that's what our court system is based on. You're innocent until you are proven guilty. And this seemed to kind of do the opposite.
Okay.
It seemed to move towards you had to prove. And as a matter of fact, there was language in that bill that was saying that if you couldn't prove that that's not what was in your heart or in your mind, that the trier of facts could determine that you were guilty.
Right.
And it's a $10,000 fine, and I think up to 5 years in jail. This is no little smack on the wrist. This could be quite serious.
So just so we're clear, we're all against hate speech, right? I mean, no one likes, but we're
Yeah.
talking about writing a law that is punitive and punishes people for certain actions. And the foundation is that you're innocent until proven guilty, not you're guilty until proven innocent. So I just want to be very clear. Like, I don't like hate speech.
No.
I don't like it, and to a certain degree, I would say, uh, with our speech, I don't know that we've all done hate speech. With our speech, we've all used our speech inappropriately at times, whether we've been frustrated or angry at our kids or, just whatever, but speech is very interesting because to monitor that and then the motive behind that assigned. we're going down a slippery slope, is what I'm hearing you say.
Well, right. And if you kind of try to put things into perspective when we're talking about speech, you can't go into a crowded theater and yell fire.
Right.
Okay, that's speech, but that can result in real physical harm or death.
Hmm.
So that's a little bit different than calling somebody a not very nice name,
Right.
right? I think most people could agree on that.
Right.
But you're right, that when it comes to hate speech, there's not a single person that I know that thinks that verbally assaulting somebody or physically assaulting somebody is good,
Right.
is okay.
Right. The question is, do they, is there a weight of a crime that fits 10 years? Is that what you said, 10 years?
I think it's up to 5 years
Or
and a
5 years?
$10,000
Oh,
fine.
oh, $10,000 fine. Does it balance? Is that a just punishment for that? And then how do you prove that it's a hate speech versus anger or greed or, something else that's motivating that type of speech? Right?
Well, right. And so there were two parts to it, though. There's the criminal component,
Mm,
and if the prosecutor, didn't prosecute it, then there's basically a private right of action where you can bring a civil lawsuit,
okay.
right?
Hmm.
And obviously, in civil lawsuits, you have less, of a bar to try to meet than you do a criminal case,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
So, and we live in a litigious society. Unfortunately, I wish that we had a little less of that. So, there were some real concerns that were coming up that if everything is a hate crime based on somebody's feelings, and
Hmm.
that's what this was talking about, was somebody's feelings
Right.
rather than somebody's actions, then what happens if we're talking about the really bad hate crimes,
Hmm.
right? When we're talking about somebody really hates somebody and they uh really hurt them or they kill them based on that hate, that's uh, awfully, that's egregious.
Right.
And that is far different than the story that we were talking about in the very beginning, but in the court system, they would be treated the same.
Hmm.
So then you run the risk, if everything is a hate crime at that point, of tying up officers that have to try to make a decision, as far as investigating that versus trying to protect our society from violent crime, um, that isn't involved with speech. But you also have the court system
Hmm.
that gets tied up in that as well. So I don't think that's the goal, that most people wouldn't want that to be an unintended consequence of not putting some reasonable side guards on what we are determining um, is considered a crime or not.
So what I'm hearing you say is, you don't like inappropriate speech, you don't like hate speech, you don't
No.
like these things. But the question is, in the law, how do we move this forward with the context of you don't control the committee, you don't control the House, you don't control the Senate or the executive branch, or the conservatives don't control all those things. So that leads us to the next question. What did you do with this horrible bill that had kind of a blank check that could label many things a hate speech?
So, well, like I said, the first thing that I did was start asking some questions to try
Mhm.
to understand the bill.
Right.
I'm not a sponsor of it, and I didn't have any real understanding of it until I heard the testimony that day.
Right.
Um, so, I started kind of looking into it, and like you said, we are in a deep minority. So, the majority can pass any bill that they want, and they can stop any bill that they want.
Hmm.
So we are then in a position of, if, because some bills are great, and they get bipartisan support, and, they're very good bills that are meant to help people and they produce good results. So that's
Right.
great. I mean, that's a win all day long that I will get behind and support.
Mhm.
On the other hand, sometimes we have well-intentioned bills from people that may see things in a different way, and they're trying to solve a problem, but we haven't had the conversation up until the point that the bill is introduced. So the bill is seeking to um, fix a problem that they see.
Mhm.
And the question again that I was left asking is this reasonable? Can it be used in a way that it shouldn't be used? Which
Right.
I felt that that was a possibility based on what I was hearing, the
Mhm.
example given. And I thought, okay, well, in the way that the bill process works, is a bill will start out as an idea and then it goes through committee. You hear the legislation, you hear people give testimony, and then you have an opportunity to offer what we call amendments. So you identify, okay, I agree with this, but I see an issue with this. If we tweak it a little bit and we add this, will you accept this amendment? And then the bill can move forward. Uh,
Mhm.
or you get caught in kind of a stalemate where sometimes you'll see bills that um, one side will vote all in favor of it and another side will not vote for it at all. um, and obviously our goal is to work for the people that we represent, and that's Democrats, Republicans, Independents,
Right. Right.
that's everybody.
Mhm.
So the goal is to try to put out good, reasonable, and fair products.
Right.
So I looked at the California law and thought, okay, well, it seems reasonable to me that in our justice system that we do require some sort of bar that has to be met, especially when we're talking about charging somebody with a crime. That's reasonable, and that language, that a hate crime is committed in whole or in substantial part,
Mhm.
because then it requires a lot more proof,
Right.
other than just an accusation.
Okay. So did you work on an amendment or what did you do?
Yes, there was an amendment that
Mhm.
we were able to come up with. I'm not a lawyer, but we did have somebody else in our caucus that is a lawyer. So he agreed to take the amendment and explain it in a way that legalese a
Mhm.
little better than what I could, especially considering this was coming from the prosecutor's office.
Mhm.
So and part of this process, the way, because I truly didn't think that they would take the amendment,
Mhm.
so we talked with the prime sponsor about it, and she said, well, if we take the amendment, would you vote for the bill?
So I'm going to show them where this amendment is on the screen here. It's right here. Amendment. Is that right? Am I in the right spot?
You should be. It's kind of hard for me to see because
See that? Okay.
yeah, the screen is real tiny, but
Okay.
it looks like you're in the right place. And yes, they would be able to click on it to be able to read it.
Yeah. So this is available through our app or our website. It's Bill 1052, and you can see the amendment there. Anyways, keep going. So they came back.
Yeah, so they came back and they said, well, if we take the amendment, will you vote yes on the bill? And of course, you're kind of in this spot where that if they don't take the amendment, this is somebody could be in real trouble,
Right.
because there's no reasonable side guards with this. But if they take the amendment, then there is, the option that somebody is going to be fairly treated in the justice system, which is what we should all be, rooting for, supporting. So, I did say, yes, I would vote for the bill, even though I really don't like hate crimes bills. Um, I think that, kind of like what we mentioned earlier, when you think of domestic violence, there's no domestic violence crime. That does not exist. What does exist is assault. And if it fits into certain parameters, then domestic violence is an enhancement, basically. So it's an assault crime, and then there are other aspects of it that are these aspects met, and that's when it becomes domestic violence. And truly, that's how I was looking at this one, saying, okay, was there a crime committed? What was the metrics of the crime? Um, and would it make sense to say that you have to prove that a crime was committed, and you would make the hate crime part of it an enhancement if those particular elements were met? So that's what was going through my mind, while we were trying to work out this bill. So the
Let me
process.
let me
Go
show
ahead.
them. Let me show them the amendment. I think I can get it big enough so you can see, because I think this is part of what we try to do at FPIW, is educate people on the process. You can see that this is an amendment, page 1, line 8, after in, insert substantial. So this is what Representative Jenny Graham is describing in whole and part, and then it gives the effect. So this was inserted where before, if I'm hearing you right, it was a little bit more of a blank check, right? Like they didn't have to
No,
substantiate.
it was a blank check. It
Okay.
said in whole or in part without any sort of definition.
Yeah. So this information is public information, and you may be thinking, why is this important? Well, it's only important once you've been accused of hate crime or hate speech. It's going to be incredibly important that that's in there. And so then you offer this amendment, and they basically said, "Will you vote for it?" And then I interrupted you, so I apologize. But
Well, that's okay.
I wanted
And,
to show them.
like I said, I had two choices. I could not, vote for the bill and they wouldn't accept the amendment, or I could vote for a bill that I really didn't like, knowing, that they would take the amendment and it would make a bad bill better, which again it's so hard when you're in that position. And of course, knowing that this wasn't the final vote for
Right.
that bill, it
So
still has.
explain that slowly. So this bill now with this amendment goes to where?
It'll go to the Senate now,
Right.
and it'll go through the same process over in the Senate.
So committee, and
It'll
then
go through committee. Yep, it has to go through the committee process, and then it'll go into rules. And there's a rules process where bills are pulled out. Those are the bills that make it into the pool of bills that can be pulled out for an up or down vote on the floor.
mhm,
So if the bill ends up coming to the Senate floor and they end up voting on the bill, it is possible that there could be other amendments that are put on the bill at that point. It is possible that they could strip the amendment out, that protection of insubstantial part, rather
mhm,
than no definition at all.
mhm.
Um, and we will have to vote on it at that point. Um, at least at that point, I can say that I tried. If they did strip it out, which I have no control over,
Right.
I was looking at trying to make sure that whoever was facing this was going to be treated fairly in our
Mhm.
justice system, and it wasn't going to be weaponized against somebody.
So I want to say this again because people have been jumping on, jumping off, coming in and going out. Representative Jenny Graham and myself, Pastor Brian Noble, don't like any hate speech. That's not what we're talking about. We don't like people to talk inappropriately or be rude or those kind of things. We're talking about law that criminalizes and imputes sentences and damages for this, and how to prove that. The evidence of proving, are you guilty until proven innocent? Are you innocent until proven guilty? And so I just want to be really clear. None of us like hate speech. We're not trying to justify it. It was just a blank check that really you were guilty until proven innocent, and you were trying to create it so that it had some guardrails on it if you're just
Right.
jumping on. And so there was an amendment offered, and now this bill with the amendment goes to the Senate floor and through their whole process, committee rules, and then back to the floor again. And now if it's not changed, it goes to the executive branch, right? But if it is changed, it comes back to the House, or does it come back to the House either way? If it's not changed, does it just go to the executive or yeah.
Well, there's concurrence. There's a concurrence process.
Okay.
So that's hard to say because I don't know if there's going to be any changes
Right.
made to
Right.
it or not. I don't know if anybody's going to put any more amendments on it or if they're going to try to strip out the amendment that we had in there.
Right.
If there are any changes that are made, though, there has to be a concurrence where it comes back over where we have to accept the changes.
Right.
And
Right.
that's where you vote on, that's where the final vote for the bill is done.
Right.
And that at that particular point in time, no, I would not be voting for that bill
Mhm.
because again, I really don't like hate crimes bills. But at the same token though, I understand it probably better than most people would think. Because I was also really kind of struggling with the example that was given versus what our family actually lived,
Mhm.
which was a man who hated women
Mhm.
and also hated if they were um, involved in sex work. I have a sister who was being sex trafficked when she was murdered.
Right.
She was barely 15 years old.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a horrible, horrible situation. But the bottom line is he murdered her because she was female and because he considered her to be a sex worker.
Mhm.
Um, if that is not the epitome of a hate crime, when you are murdering dozens of people based on the fact that they're female and they're a sex, I don't know what else would be a better example of a hate crime.
Mhm.
And that wasn't charged as a hate crime, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around
Mhm.
because it doesn't make any sense when you actually take somebody's life because you hate them.
Mhm. Yeah, and so these are things you have to wrestle with as a representative. You have your personal things, you have the examples that they share in the committees, you have the bill that's saying in front of you, and you got, and we have to understand this is very important. Uh, a liberal mindset owns every committee, the House floor, the House, the Senate, and the executive branch.
Mhm,
So a lot of this is triage that you're doing. You're doing
mhm,
triage on bad bills, and of course, there are some that you all agree on and you think it's good for everyone. But on some of these, it is triage as we go. So, any closing remarks that you want to make? I really do appreciate you coming on explaining this. I actually think I was in this hearing that when it originally came out because I happened to be in Olympia that day, and just I think we shook hands and I said hi, and I was concerned. I was like, well, what if you're preaching God's word and
mhm,
you're just reading the Bible, and now the Bible's considered hate speech. That's what went through my head.
mhm.
Um,
It's what was
so
going through my head too,
right,
right?
right. So I
You
mean
know?
that just the Bible calls certain behaviors sin, and that doesn't mean it's hate. I don't hate any of those people, but the Bible calls them sin, and some of those sins I've lying or whatever we've all done, and the Bible says that God hates that, and
Mhm.
uh we need to repent of those things and turn to him and ask for forgiveness. But any closing remarks? So as you go through, I think this is a great explanation of how the bill process works and to help people
Mhm.
understand where you're doing triage on some of these bills.
Right. It's a messy process. And, we are in, an environment that's not forgiving. You're
Mhm.
under a microscope, in a spotlight,
Yeah.
so to speak. And, I am very grateful for, the people that are going out of their way to pay attention. They are tuning into the committee hearings. They're sending us questions. They're sending emails. They're making phone calls, because we do our best work when we're including the people we're making decisions with them, which was part of the other part of this was I have people from my district that were sending me messages about this, that were concerned about this, or they supported it, because you have people that inevitably, no matter what you try to do, you're going to have people that are not going to agree. So in my opinion, I try to take the emotion out of it and focus on, what does the law say now? How is this going to possibly affect somebody's life? Is it fair?
Right.
Is it just? Um, because if this goes through and the governor signs it, somebody's going to be on the other end of this. So I don't control everything that goes on, but I do think that we have a moral duty, when we see something that could be a problem, even if it's uncomfortable for us, to do what we can do to try, to make something not as bad as what it could be.
Yeah. Well, Representative Jenny Graham, thank you so much for representing us and doing your best to bring in the principles of the Spokane area and the constituents that you represent, and being our voice there in Olympia, and just keep us up to date. I think it's really important for people to understand how decisions are made, why they're made. I think it helps in conversation. If you haven't gone to fpiwaction.org, you can go down there and you can find Jenny's Representative Jenny Graham's email. It's her Ledgewa email, and you can communicate with her or ask her questions. She's always been very approachable. So, any other closing remarks, and then we're gonna say our goodbyes and go out and have a great Valentine's dinner out there.
Yeah. No, I'm just very grateful that, we're able to have this conversation, because I think, in the world, what I see now is we need to learn how to be able to have respectful, honest, robust conversations, and we need to be able to have them publicly, which is what I believe that we're doing right now. I think that that's the better way, to try to get our needs met and to try to find solutions to easy problems and really tough problems sometimes. So I'm grateful, for the opportunity to be able to do this and to really put this out in an authentic way, meant to be a kitchen table conversation. This is meant to be an icebreaker.
Right. Absolutely. So we need to talk about it. We need to, I believe in free speech. Jenny Graham believes in free speech. We need to have this. Of course, there are limits. You can't, like she said, you can't yell out fire in a crowded theater or something like that. But we believe in those things. We also believe in fair and equal application of the law, and that a person's innocent until proven guilty. And some of these items, when we're talking about motives of the heart, are very hard to prove. Now, if it's a physical assault or a pattern of assault, or those kind of things that are more external, are much easier to substantiate the evidence of that. But anyways, Representative Jenny Graham, thank you so much for coming on today and just giving us your perspective and how you have made an amendment. And we'll see what happens on the Senate floor, and if it comes back to the House, or if it goes from there. So
Okay, thanks.
Blessings on you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You love our beautiful state, but does fighting for issues that most affect families ever feel like you're climbing alone? It can feel like an uphill climb in a hostile environment that champions causes detrimental to Washington families. Again and again, the summit feels out of reach, but you don't have to climb alone. With like-minded people fighting for Washington families by your side, the journey becomes not just possible, but powerful. The Defender app, brought to you by the Family Policy Institute of Washington, connects you with your team for the climb ahead. Connect with conservatives who care about issues affecting families in your specific county and across our state in order to make our voices be heard locally and in Olympia. Simply click Learn to stay informed about the latest news affecting families. With one click, press Huddle to team up with other conservative minds in your specific county who care about how these issues affect you in your unique community. Then simply press Activate to get involved and to make your voice heard on legislation that matters in Olympia. With the Washington Defender app, you won't face the fight alone. Together, we can make a difference for families in Washington. Download the Washington Defender app today, a simple way to let your voice be heard.